When you have such an intimate relationship with these intelligences, they become the wind on your sails, without needing to perform specific rituals even. It feels like being in the circle all the time.
Salutations, listeners, and welcome back to Glitch Bottle, the podcast where we uncork the uncommon in magic, mysticism, and the generally misunderstood. Today, we're so excited to talk about Hollywood's perception of magic with Ana Victoria Esquivel. So, what does Hollywood and the media in general get right about its portrayal of magic? And what does it get wrong? Is everyone in Hollywood a practitioner of some kind of esotericism? Is no one a practitioner? Or is the answer somewhere in between? Well, Ana Victoria Esquivel is the best person to ask about her perspective on these questions and so much more. Ana is a Hollywood makeup artist, writer, and painter who is credited or involved with dozens of on-screen projects, including Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities and The Rings of Power, and so many more. Born and raised in Panama City, Panama, Ana has been a traditional painter and artist of many crafts since the age of 2. And in 2017, Ana moved to Los Angeles, California, to pursue her career in the film industry. Shortly after graduating, Ana became the apprentice of 3 major film industry legends in the field of special effects who noticed her determination and took her under their wing. And since then, Ana has been working as a freelance makeup artist and a lab technician for several of the major special effects studios in Hollywood and on film and TV sets. In this episode, we go deep into not only Ana's background and early experience with esotericism in Panama, but also how esotericism informs Ana's creative work in Hollywood, and also details about Ana's own practice as an esotericist. And now, to help us uncork the uncommon, let's welcome Ana Victoria Esquivel.
Ana Victoria Esquivel, thank you so much for stopping on the Glitch Bottle podcast today.
Thank you so much, Alexander, for having me here. I am extremely happy and honored to have a voice in this community and to be on your podcast. And I'm really excited about chatting today.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me, Ana? The honor is certainly mine. Before asking you a question, I thought it would be best to just kick things off with a comment from another amazing esotericist, Aiden Walker, who's been on the podcast before, who says, quote, "No questions for me right now, but I'd just like to note that Ana is the effing bomb. I am stoked about this podcast."
Oh my God. Okay, so it's kind of ridiculous for me to realize that this is happening because I started off as a fan of Aiden and I didn't even know who he was, what he looked like. He was just, in my mind, he was just like a witch in the woods. I read his books during a time where he was like taking a break from the face of earth, and being such a fan of his work itself, to eventually getting in touch with him, to now being his friend, and for him to speak of me that way, it's just kind of surreal to me.
Totally agree with you. I mean, Aiden is a legend. He's wonderful. In addition to that, Ana, so before you became public with all of your esoteric practices, before you even came to LA in 2017, you have a very inspirational journey. You growing up in Panama City, Panama. Can you kind of take us back before we get into your excellent professional work and esotericism? Can you tell us about growing up in Panama City and when it came to your family, to your friends, to the culture that you grew up in? Did it give you any early exposure to esotericism, to esoteric practices, any traditions? Anything you can share would be awesome.
Yes, so I would love to set the stage so you can understand where I'm coming from. The first thing I want you to know is that Panama is a very conservative country that is not very accepting of anything other than Catholicism. So I grew up under the wing of the Catholic Church. I lived through the satanic panic that led into the 90s, and I was generally just steered away from anything fun from a very early age. Now, here's the ironic part. Esotericism was always hiding in plain sight. And being, neurodivergent as I am, there was no way that I was not going to find it, reading between the lines. And all the way from how deeply superstitious Hispanic families are to all the tales and legends of supernatural creatures hiding in the mountains and the forests and the jungle, I would say that my childhood was surrounded by the occult, and there was no religious paradigm that could shy me away from my fascination towards it from a very early age. And I think that even within the religion, I think that Catholics are just magicians in denial of themselves. And I was always concerned with, the big questions of heaven and hell, of the meaning of everything. And if anything, I would say that my environment served to feed my deeply philosophical nature. But even inside the church spaces that I was surrounded by, I was failing to find people who wanted to talk about deep existential subjects and question things the way that I did. So I always felt very alone and very disconnected, which is why I have always gravitated towards the occult, basically like a moth to a flame, because it is the only space where I have been able to grow intellectually and philosophically.
Can you share with us one or maybe more of your first direct memories or experiences that first confirmed the esoteric for you as you were growing up, as you were going through this? Was there one particular moment? Was it several moments? What was going on for you at that early stage?
Yes. So this one is interesting because sometimes I like to think of childhood as this strange dreamlike state. I don't know if you feel that way, but every time I remember my childhood, I almost remember it like a dream, like if it didn't happen, but I know it did. And in that dreamlike state, which is childhood, sometimes the line between what's real and what isn't real is a lot more blurred than when you're an adult. And the only thing I can tell you is that from a very early age, my first experiences with the esoteric were not very positive. I was always haunted by these horrible nightmares and these shadow things that I couldn't explain. I had a really hard time being in the dark or being alone in a room because I would immediately start seeing things, and adults didn't believe me, and my parents would get upset at me because I would wake up at night and not want to be alone. And thankfully, as I have grown older, these things have ceased to happen, at least in the way that they used to. But also, I feel like as my walls have grown stronger, whatever those things were, might have seemed less interested in spending time around me. But I just remember being this really scared kid, because imagine having a connection to the supernatural and not having any explanation towards it. And on top of that, growing under a religion that tells you that everything supernatural is bad. So I was a very terrified kid who was just really sensitive towards the other side, to put it that way, and no guidance to explain anything to me. That's the earliest thing that I can tell you. But I did have one specific experience in high school, which really, really, really helped to cement in my mind the acceptance that there is something supernatural about our reality. And I know this sounds like a bar joke, but in my graduation party, there were 3 people. Me, an agnostic back then, because I was going through an existential crisis where I wasn't sure if I believed in things or not. There was a friend of mine who was a complete atheist. And there was another friend who was a devout Catholic. So that's why I'm saying it sounds like a bar joke. However, we're sitting at a park. It's at night. We're in front of my house. And the three of us are just talking. And out of nowhere, we see two orbs of green light that come floating around us, kind of like do a little dance in the air, and then they just disappear. And the knee-jerk reaction was just to look at each other and not say anything. We were like, what the hell was that? Because they were too big to be a laser pointer. There were no neighbors anywhere around. It was really late at night. We really tried to find an explanation. And in the end, just the three of us kind of sat there and accepted that we had just experienced something supernatural and that we would never understand what it was. But it was in that moment that I understood, like, even if you're Catholic, even if you're atheist, even if you're confused, you're not immune to these things. So after that moment, I just got a lot more curious and a lot more obsessed with my search for the truth and to find the meaning of things.
For some reason, Anna, I'm reminded of a quote. I can't remember who said it, but it's that humans do not choose their beliefs, meaning like you don't think, oh, I'm going to let me weigh the evidence this way and let me weigh the evidence that way. Like if you see green orbs coming at you and there's no explanation and they're kind of circumambulating and it's like, what is going on? You can't choose that. You just automatically are open to that possibility.
And on top of that, it wasn't unverified personal gnosis. It was very peer-reviewed experience that was shared with people of different belief systems. So, that's interesting.
Oh my gosh, yes. Okay, so you're delving into this world intentionally or unintentionally. This just happens. And as you're going through this, you're also, and as we said in the introduction, since the age of 2, you have been involved in some form of artistic expression. So while this is going on, Anna, can you tell us about where was your early interest in painting and in the arts and in crafts, and how did these experiences interweave with your artistic expression? How did magic relate to this? Like, what was going on during all this time?
Yes. So I would say that I owe the gift of painting to 2 specific people. The first is my grandmother, and the second would be my granduncle, her brother, who, by the way, parenthesis, I would later come to discover as an adult that he was an occultist. But, people would deny it. People will never accept it, but I have proof, and I'm very excited about that. But anyway, them 2, they were very interesting people. From a very early age, they taught me how to draw and paint. And instead of treating me like a child, they taught me how to draw and paint like an adult. And even if I was a kid, they gave me access to tools and techniques that kids would not normally be exposed to. They never patronized me. They never treated me like a child. They said like, hey, you're painting outside the lines, or hey, like this shadow doesn't look right. Like they would treat me that way. And I really appreciate that because I wasn't just receiving just like empty compliments. I was really being challenged. And they were very talented. And this, of course, has a huge connection to my experience with magic, because wherever my grandmother was, magic would follow. She was a person with a really vivid imagination who always entertained us with fantastical stories when we were kids. And she would swear to us that the supernatural was real and that magic existed. And she was the only adult in my entire family who would affirm to me that my worldview was valid. So that childlike wonder was reinforced by an adult in my childhood. And I think that's a very important thing. And because someone like her taught me how to draw and paint, I always used drawing and painting as a tool for escapism, for transcending my reality and bringing into this plane of existence things that would only exist in my mind. And we know that magic is manifesting these things from a thought plane of existence into the physical world. So you can see the connection there.
So this kind of leads to, as you're going through this, can you tell us about when was your first exposure to an occult themed or a magical themed, either a movie, a TV show, or some other medium?
Again, I have to mention my grandma, because from a very early age, she would expose me to really messed up movies that were not meant for kids. She made me watch Alien when I was 3 years old, and I became obsessed with the xenomorph. She would make me watch all these horrible movies, like from a really, really early age. And because I wasn't like exposed to them in a way that was supposed to scare me, I was exposed to them through an adult telling me that they were cool and fun. I developed a fascination instead of a rejection. She would also make me watch that movie Ghost, where you know that there's these shadow things coming from like taking people to hell and whatever. And that, of course, started feeding my ideas of like what happens after you die, et cetera, et cetera. She would always make me watch a Sleepy Hollow. My grandma would do these crazy things. She had a horror mask collection, and she would like pretend that there was a sound in a different room. And then she would go to the other room and come back with like a mask, being almost like, oh, like my grandma's gone. Now there's this thing chasing us around the house. Like it was really messed up. And that's very Hispanic, because in Latin America, our upbringing is a little more crazy. But I also really appreciate that, because I would say that really, really started planting a seed in my mind from a very early age to have fascination and admiration towards horror movies and just things that have to do with the occult in the film industry. And honestly, like even if my grandma just did that as a form of entertainment, I feel like I really needed that, because I needed someone to sell me on the narrative that what we create and the stories that we tell in fantastical media have some kind of relevance and place in this world. And, you know, instead of exiling me from a very early age to the horrible and sad world of material reductionism, I would say that she made sure that I would grow up to be a headstrong animist. And that has saved my life, and it has marked my career.
So then can you tell us about this amazing decision that you made in 2017, 7 years ago at the time of this recording, and you decided to move from Panama to LA, to Los Angeles, to pursue your career in the film industry. What motivated you? What was the big decision factor or factors? Like, what was going on with that?
Yes. So I am going to fill in a gap in here, because there is a part that I feel like it's important mentioning it, even if it's not directly related. When I graduated from high school, I didn't originally go straight into this field. I studied architecture. I graduated from architecture school, and I became an architect building houses and skyscrapers for around 5 years. So I had a normal career in the cubicle world, but always that dream and that fire inside me to create something of my own, to have any kind of relationship to fantasy. And the reason why I chose a traditional career back then, I think at the age of 18, I just wanted to prove to people that I could do difficult things. Like I wanted people to have that respect for me that comes with a difficult title, because architecture is a very difficult career. And I was a valedictorian in my architecture class. Like I really, really, really kicked my own ass studying that career, and I gave it everything I had back then. And when I went into the cubicle world, I realized that all the creativity and the fun that I experienced in the classroom was met with the sad and disappointing reality that in the real world, it was more about cutting budgets and cheapening things to the point where my design was just reduced to the same building that everybody feels comfortable building instead of everything that made it creative and special. And also just the whole 9 to 5, which in architecture, it's more like 9 to 10 because we work overtime every single day. I felt very trapped. I felt like a bird inside a cage. And I had this crazy siren calling for the arts that even if I tied myself to the post of the boat, I could not resist it. Like something was telling me that I needed to escape the cubicle and the rat race and do something that was more meaningful for me. And I've always been a huge fan of film. Like I used to do theater, like I was a musical theater person. I used to do my own little projects. And always, like on the side, as I was an architect, I was always doing makeup on the weekends, like as a passion. I would do it for theater. I would do it for the fashion industry. I would do it for runways. And I had a lot of creative freedom as a makeup artist. And sometimes I was even making more money as a makeup artist than as an architect, you know? And this is Panama. Like, I don't know if that's a reality everywhere else in the world, but I saw an opportunity. And it's crazy because for me, coming to the film industry meant 1, immigrating, 2, starting over, not super in my early 20s, like at the age of 28. Because when I moved to LA, I was 28. Like I was almost going into my 30s. It's really scary for a lot of people to start over at that point. But I'm really happy that I did it because I think that I would have not survived in the cubicle. You know, I like to think that some people feel more comfortable in that environment based on their personality, but it was not for me. And I risked everything. I came to this country with 1 suitcase to start over. And that's literally what drove my decision.
What incredible courage you had to take that step. And again, another quote that comes to mind, I can't remember who said it, but they said, the thing about the rat race is, even if you win, you're still a rat, right? So breaking out of that cubicle world, that rat race world, and yet 1 suitcase and a dream. I mean, there's something so inspirational about that. And I know myself, and I'm sure for the listeners as well. So take us to that moment. You arrive, you have 1 suitcase and your dream. You are starting over a totally different country. Take us through how you got started and eventually, as we said in the introduction, your apprenticeships to 3 major film industry legends. I mean, what happened next with that suitcase and you being here?
Well, my first year in LA was the craziest experience in my entire life. I went through every single bad, horrible, negative, and trying thing that I could have possibly gone through. I lost it all and started over multiple times. I was in really bad situations. I was, in the waiting room of an ER with no health insurance. Like I went through all the scary fears of being an immigrant or starting over in a place where you don't have a single friend and a single family member and a single person that you know, because that's how alone I was. But I pushed through, and my plan is that when I came here, I took a 2-month class in a makeup school locally in LA just to learn certain technical lab techniques for fabricating prosthetic kind of things. And while I was in that school, it's like the clock was ticking on me because I had those 2 months to meet people, to find a job, to kind of create a network so that when that purpose was over, when that one task of being in that school was over, I would have the next thing. So I didn't just come here to figure it out. Like I had a plan. So it is important to have a plan. So when I was in that makeup school, one day, there was this old man that looked like Radagast from the Hobbit movie. And he was talking to my instructor, and I noticed that he had a physical printed portfolio with him. And the pictures inside that portfolio were really incredible pictures, because they were pictures from the very original sculptures of the Predator, of Hellboy, of all these things, like things that we've never seen because they don't exist on the internet. They exist in these tiny little Polaroid pictures in one man's personal physical portfolio from the 80s. And I was just really fascinated by him because he looked very unsuspecting and just like a very, very, like self-deprecating artist that you would find somewhere hiding in his apartment, not eating or sleeping for days. That's what he looked like. And then I just went to talk to him, and I was a little scared because I was very intimidated and starstruck by everyone when I first came here. And he immediately was super warm and friendly, but he was also very weird. And we connected over our weirdness because I'm a very weird person too. Little did I know, we just talked and talked and talked until the school was closing for the day and they were kicking us out. And it didn't feel like enough. Like the conversation was not over. So he kept coming back to the school to talk to me, literally to talk to me. He would come into my classroom, greet my teacher. My teacher would let him in because he was a legend in the film industry. So my teacher would let him in. He would come to my station and be like, I found these pictures that can help you for your next project. And we just started geeking out about things. And I wasn't fully comprehending who he was when we first met, because what I was seeing is like how compatible we were as friends. But then I came to learn that his name was Matt Rose, and he was the main sculptor under Rick Baker's studio throughout the 80s and the 90s. And he was like his right-hand man that was there during all the big projects that Rick Baker worked on, like Harry and the Hendersons, like Gremlins, like Hellboy, Hellboy eventually got passed on to a different studio. But this man was the most talented sculptor in the entire film industry, and he did not care about it at all. He was the most humble, down-to-earth, completely devoted to the arts person that I had ever met in my life. And he became my best friend, and he became my mentor. And he took me under his wing, and I feel like what Matt did for me, more than just like network or anything like that, what Matt did for me is that he showed me to believe in myself in a moment where I had horrible imposter syndrome because I didn't feel like I had a place in the room with those people. I was just like some girl from Panama. And Matt Rose took interest in me as an artist, and he believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And actually, I owe it to him to basically meet my second mentor, which my second mentor was Jordi Ushell, who is one of the most talented creature designers in the entirety of the film industry. He basically designed and created the looks of the aliens and all the fauna and flora for the Avatar movies. So the way that the Na'vi look, we owe it to him. Like, he created that. He was one of the lead creature designers in Men in Black, also in the Alien sequels. So the way that I came across him was very random. But basically, I saw a job posting on like a career services program that the school had, but it was kind of old, and I didn't know if he even needed anyone anymore. But I still like reached out, and I didn't get an answer. But I really, really, really just didn't know even like where the studios were or who to talk to. So I kept calling, I kept sending emails, I kept literally like bugging him, and he would not get back to me. And one day, in a moment of madness, and this is important. Moments of madness are important. because in a moment of madness, I drove to his studio uninvited with a really shitty portfolio because my work was not that good, in my opinion, back then, and a letter of recommendation from Matt Rose, which he only wrote one letter of recommendation in his whole career, and it was for me because he told me that. Yeah, it's crazy. So the thing is, I show up to Jordu's parking lot uninvited. He arrives at work. He sees this girl just standing there, and he's like, "Excuse me, ma'am." And I was like, "Hello, I really want you to see my work, and I would love to work for your studio." And he's like, "Are you out of your mind? Like, did you just show up here?" And I was like, "Yes, yeah." And he's like, "Well, come in. I'll look at your work, whatever." So when he looked at my work, he was unimpressed because I'm telling you, my work was not impressive. I had, the will to be good and the determination to work really hard, but there's a long way to get good at this stuff, and I wasn't there yet. So he was not like impressed by my work. He was impressed by the letter of recommendation from Matt Rose. And that is why he decided to give me a chance as his assistant. He hired me. Initially, I was not allowed to touch the art. I was just doing boring things like answering phone calls, sending email, mailing packages, all those kind of things. And slowly through time, he would let me watch him work. He would let me partake in the work. And I learned very fast because I have a background in art. When you're a painter, when you're a sculptor, learning art is easier. So I became good really fast, but I just needed somebody to give me that one yes, that one open door. That's all I needed. And thankfully, I got that. Working through Jordu, I met my third mentor. Her name was Denise Bear, and she was the most talented specialty hair technician in the entire film industry. She did this very niche thing called hair punching, which is when you put hair on a silicone head to make it look like real eyebrows and real eyelashes, but you insert hair by hair with a needle and even a full head. Like, it's like a crazy, excruciatingly difficult skill. And also the making of wigs through hair ventilating, which is when you tie hair on a wig or lace pieces. She was an expert in that. And she also worked for Rick Baker throughout a big chunk of her career. And then she just went on to be a freelancer and work for everyone else. I met her through Jordu, and she didn't really mentor people a lot. She was very private with her skills because she invented a lot of the techniques that she mastered. She invented them or developed them herself. And I was very fortunate that for any strange reason, we just happened to get along. And she also took me under her wing, and she taught me her methods and her ways. And she even let me inherit a lot of her clients. It's very sad she passed away last year. But as she was passing away, she was just basically telling a lot of people that I was the person that was learning from her. So thanks to her, I have managed to stay afloat as a freelancer, because she put me on the map after I decided to become a freelancer.
There's something so deeply magical about that, because many of the grimoires say this spirit gives good familiars, or this spirit is good at connecting you with other spirits. These doors kept opening for you, and it all started with just one spark. Did it feel like you knew in your mind that you were walking down a specific path, or did it feel like you were surfing the waves of chaos and finding things? Or what did it feel like?
So I'll tell you something interesting, and we'll get more into this later. But initially from the get-go, I can tell you that when I moved to LA, I wasn't an esotericist or an occultist or a magician to the degree that I am now. I was still kind of figuring it out. But I was doing something very important in my first months being in LA, which is that I was trying to use whatever spiritual tools that I had to my availability at that moment to remain in a state of openness and possibility. So I was like reciting a lot of mantras that were mantras that are supposed to align you with like opportunities and good luck and that kind of stuff. And I was dipping my toes into a lot of different things that I wasn't fully settled into, but those things I feel helped me because they kept me grounded in the face of really horrible fear, because I was dealing with a lot of setbacks every single day. I was going through a lot of fears. Like even in Latin America, it's pretty common to live in your parents' house until you get married. So I was living with my family all the way until I moved to LA. So it was my first time adulting even. You know what I mean? So I was going through everything at the same time, and just having these little spiritual practices that were very simple at the moment, I feel those things kept me in a state of possibilities rather than in a state of complete abandonment to fear. And I really think that created like a vortex for these things to happen, because I was getting crazy synchronicities around me during this time. Like when I was doubting whether to go to Jordu's shop or not, his last name is Shell. And I remember that day I went to the bank and I saw a shell inside the bank. Like, how is there a shell on the floor of a bank that's in a mountainous area? Like, just crazy things. I was seeing crazy things that to me were synchronicities telling me that I was on the right path. And that's how it felt like.
With Matt Rose, with Jordu Shell, with Denise Bear, when then, given all of these doors that are opening and your esotericism, when did you first start getting involved in your professional art with esoteric productions, horror productions? Your resume is amazing. I mean, you're credited or involved in everything from Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities, which I know people can check out on Netflix, I believe, to The Rings of Power, to literally dozens and dozens of other projects. So like, how did that shift happen? When did you first get involved in the professional esoteric and horror side of things?
Yes. So this is an insane thing to think about, because my biggest bucket list item in the film industry, at least when I came here, was to work for Guillermo del Toro. And it happened pretty early on in my career. So that always kind of shocks me, because it's hard sometimes to think like, well, how am I going to do something bigger than that now? And of course there are, there's a lot of milestones that I still have to reach, but it happens so early on. And I think that mentioning Guillermo is very important, because seeing his work, seeing Pan's Labyrinth, seeing Shape of Water, Hellboy, all the movies, even the ones that are not that popular in the US, like The Orphanage and all the other ghost stories that he's done, I think that Guillermo really has served as a patron for the monsters and the esoteric in a way that's redemptive of them, as opposed to demonizing of them. And the fact that I was involved in one of his productions was so incredible, because there's this unique feeling of when the things that you look up to and you believe in and that fill you spiritually get intertwined with the work that you do for a living. So suddenly now you have a role within that world that has done so much for you. And that happened in 2021. So I would say that before that, I was just having a smaller participation in smaller projects. But it was really in 2021 when I did that movie for him that things really started kicking off for me, because when I worked on that project, I was 1 month into being a freelancer. I was not a freelancer beforehand. I had a full-time job. So when I gave myself the opportunity to do the scary leap that is to just throw yourself in the ocean of when am I going to have work next, the first thing that came through being Guillermo, like, that's insane. Like, I can't even believe it when I think about it sometimes. And after that, other productions followed. I was involved for a long time in the Chucky TV series. There's a TV series, of Chucky, and it's actually pretty good. It's really funny. I was involved in that as Chucky's hairdresser. because I was the person who was cutting and styling all of his wigs to make sure that his hair always looked on point. And I was also involved in other fabrication aspects of working with the animatronic robot that is Chucky, because in the end of the day, he is a robot. And working with robots, it's its own thing. But Chucky is the esoteric because he is a supernaturally haunted doll. And even though I don't agree with the way that voodoo is oversimplified in, that particular lore, it's still, along those lines. And then with that same company, I worked on the sequel for Hocus Pocus, which we all know that Hocus Pocus has played a huge role in coloring the very basic tip of the iceberg impression that people have of magic and witchcraft. And, unfortunately, the movie was not great. But, I still had some kind of involvement in that.
The original puppet or creature from Tales from the Crypt was used for Chucky.
Yes.
It's the same doll. They just put Chucky's stuff, or was it the other way around? It started as Chucky and it became whatever.
The actual skeleton of Chucky, before you put the skin on him, was also used as that little robot character that you see in Daft Punk's Technologic music video. So the little thing that's singing the song, that's Chucky. So the Chucky skeleton has been used for different things. So I would not be surprised to learn that it's been, repurposed.
Yeah. When it comes to Chucky, working in the Chucky studio, working for Guillermo del Toro, I think there might be some listeners out there who are wondering, so what is Anna doing on these sets? Can you walk us through a day in the life? Are you applying individual hairs on Chucky's head? Are you working on something with Guillermo del Toro in, prosthetics or makeup? Or can you walk us through a day in the life of Ana Victoria Esquivel?
Yes, this is something that I love explaining to people because my profession is very misunderstood. So as a makeup effects artist, there are two major subdivisions of what kind of jobs you can work. The first one, being the most popularly known, is being a makeup artist on a film set, applying makeup on the face of an actor. Everybody knows that that is a thing. I do that. I don't do that 100% of the time. I would say that I'm a pretty 50-50 kind of person. And then there is the other job that's less known, which became more known thanks to a TV show called Face Off, which is the fabrication of everything that goes to the film set. So I partake in that process, and for Guillermo and for Chucky, that was the extent of my participation. So I was not on set with the bodies. I was making the bodies that would then go to set. So for example, in Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities, the name of the episode that I worked on is The Autopsy. It's a very Lovecraftian episode, and it is excellently written. So I was really happy to learn that the episode that I had worked on was something that, was a really, really good piece of film work. So I was very happy because it's not always the case. Sometimes you put a lot of work into something and then it's bad. So in this show, we first molded all these bodies from a generic mold. And then we started destroying them, emptying the chest cavity, just making them malleable with silicone so that then we could proceed and fabricate the organs and fabricate the skin flaps that then are surgically open during the scenes. And you have to do every single layer of the fat, the muscle tissues, the skin, everything. We have to make these things look as real as possible. So you basically imagine a warehouse, just a normal warehouse, full of power tools, full of air compressors, full of fiberglass molds, people wearing respirators, full body Tyvek suits, gloves. There's a bunch of girls in that show. The majority of the people that did the bodies were women. I always like saying that because it's kind of cool to see a bunch of women doing something horrifying. And, we just go there from 9 to 5. We do our little art. We fabricate these things, we go home, and then they're ready. And then they go to set and we don't see them again, which is, that's why it's cool to be at the position of power where you can go to set with the thing that was made. But usually the people that do that are the owners of the studio. I don't have like my own big studio yet. Maybe it will happen someday. So I don't always go to set with these things, but that's how the day-to-day looks like. And then with Chucky, with hair work, I did have a lot of participation in other aspects of Chucky, but with the hair work, it's just basically grabbing like this fiberglass skull cap and cutting and patching and kind of like fabricating a wig to fit exactly the shape of his head. And then with a razor blade, just cutting that shaggy hairstyle, you have to be a really good hairstylist to do that. And I have, that knowledge. And then there's other aspects that are like mold making and painting and sculpting. Now there's all the 3D technology. Now there's 3D scanning, 3D printing, which I've recently started learning. And it's infinite. Makeup effects artistry is infinite. And we're always inventing newer skills, newer ways of doing things. You have to be a sculptor, a painter. You have to be a makeup artist. You have to be a chemist. You have to know your chemicals. You have to be extremely responsible, know all the safety procedures. My job is dangerous. You can really hurt yourself or your health if you don't wear the protective equipment. So it's very heavy duty. It's very construction worker-like, but it's also very rewarding.
One of the things that I was just thinking of, Anna, that makes in-depth magical work so powerful is the creation of your own materia magica, the creation of your own implements, the forging of your own sword even, or the creation of your own vessels or pottery. There are all these skills, and I almost feel like, would it be fair to say that given what you do, it requires an incredible amount of knowledge and skills to create an almost infinite variety of things? Would that be somewhat fair?
Yes, absolutely. So there is that part where knowing all this skill set that I know as an artist really opens up possibilities when it comes to creating my own things for magical purposes. And I have been enjoying that quite a lot because it's just really satisfying to know that you have the ability. Not just for me, I have helped other people in the community create things that they absolutely need for a very particular operation. And they really just can't conceive how they're going to do it. And then they hit me up and I'm like, I got you. I know exactly how to do this. And then the other way around, I feel like when you're a person who practices magic, which you also always need all these basic skills, like knowing how to meditate, really getting into like these trance-like states, etc. It really helps you as an artist too, because you have that ability to really be present in the moment with what you're doing in front of you and really connecting to it with the full engagement that you need, which sometimes I feel like there's a disconnect between people and what they're doing for work. So I would say that the two things feed into each other a lot.
We started off this podcast with some mutual colleagues. You and I have chatted in previous months. Shout out to Aiden Walker. Shout out to Dr. Alexander Cummins. Right? There's so many different people and esotericists that I know you and I respect so much. But when it comes to your esoteric practice and how it's evolved over the last few years and what you do today, what you do now, what can you share with us? What hints, what pieces of information, anything at all would be very enlightening, I think.
I bet a lot of people are wondering exactly what I do. And I do want to make a statement about the fact that I have never been open or public about being an esotericist or an occultist or a magician, because I don't have like one term that I absolutely identify with. It's very flexible. So it was a little scary for me initially to, think about putting it out there in the world that I do this. But at the same time, I'm tired of pretending to be somebody that I am not. And this is such a big part of who I am and a big part of my purpose in this world that I feel like I should have the right to just be honest about, what I do. And I don't have to get into crazy details because that's also like a privacy thing. But I would love to share with you how I would describe myself or how I would describe my practice. This is going to be a little bit of a long one, so please bear with me. The first thing that I want to say is that the main reason why I decided to become a magician and occultist is agency, to have a choice. Because growing up, where magic was only accessible to men in a position of priesthood, I always felt like a powerless person who had little to no agency in her own life, and magic has always given me that option, the option of being in charge. And I would say that magic and I have always been inseparable, whether I had a formal practice or not. Just asking me to depart from it or to live a life without it just would be asking me like to float in the middle of the ocean with nothing. And even then, I feel like it would still be with me. So accepting magic for me it's like coming home. It's who I am. It's my biggest truth. So regarding my personal practice, I have gone all the way from being a Catholic to being a complete atheist to being an agnostic to building my own spiritual belief system completely from scratch in a long, long, long path that has been very academically inclined, and that's why I'm very proud of it. So first and foremost, like I already said, I consider myself an animist. For the people that don't know what an animist is, it's just like the belief that we live in a world that is spiritual, that there are spirit things, that it's not just the material stuff. So that's what being an animist means in the most simple way. I don't know if there's like a one-size-fits-all label, like I said, but I would say that it would be something along the lines of resonating with pagan polytheism, with a predominantly devotional practice, at least for the time being, and a little bit of dirt sorcery here and there, like my friend Aiden Walker likes to call it. It's very important for me. And the reason why I have spent most of my path just reading, and researching instead of stepping into the circle, which is something that I feel like will come down the line, is because, to be quite frank with you, to this day, I don't have the need to make one big specific operation to achieve any specific thing. I don't have that need yet. So the reason for that is because I am a very capable person, and most of the things that I desire, I know exactly how to get them just using my own intelligence and my own resources. So I really haven't had that need to step into the circle in order to make things happen, if that makes sense. Now, that's me. And the reason why I describe my practice as devotional is because I have been very fortunate, and this is pretty recently too, I'm not going to lie, to come into contact with certain entities, intelligences, gods, whatever you want to call them, that's not very important for me, that have an affinity towards me, that have perhaps always been with me, and I have decided to work with them. And I think that in our community, sometimes devotional practices can be a little bit underrated. But the way that I see it is that when you have such an intimate relationship with these intelligences, they become the wind on your sails without needing to perform specific rituals even. It feels like being in the circle all the time. And the main reason why I have started with devotional versus transactional is because I find certain operations to be very transactional in nature. And with all the respect I have in the world for those operations, because I study them a lot, the difference for me feels like developing a relationship with versus doing business with. So before I get to a point in my life where I want to do business with, I want to develop a relationship with. So that is why my practice to this day has been mostly devotional. And it has changed my life, because when you have a devotional practice, or at least in my experience, you start to embody some of the traits of these entities that you have a connection with. And through the embodiment of these traits, I have become a better person. And consequentially, this has led me to become a better professional. And I wouldn't say that I have ever used magic specifically to affect my career, like in a very specific way, but it has been affected by the betterment of myself through the spiritual practice that I have that gives me access to wisdom and to clarity. And despite some of the clarity that I get from them, I always like to remain a little bit confused, because when you have absolute clarity, you stop searching, and I don't want to stop searching. I would say that if you want me to be a little bit more specific, for example, one of the deities that I work with is Hermes. And that's just one name. That's just one name, because he's a very ancient deity or entity that has been present in multiple other cultures, even before the ancient Greeks. And I do believe in this thing of deities or spirits having different ways through which humans have decided to call them, but then in the end of the day, always being the same intelligence, the same spirit. So he has very interesting things about him, where I'm a very emotional person who sometimes can be weakened by that. And he has helped me a lot with stoicism, for instance. He's very logical and very to the point, and very like, no, think from a place of clarity. And then, there's another entity that I work with. I'm not going to mention that one because there are some that are more public and others that are more shy. But there's another one that has really helped me with embracing darker aspects of myself that were always being rejected by society and by my own person. And honestly, I see so much value in that. It's really made my life so much better, and I'm not hurting anyone by doing that. And I really, really think that I'm onto something with this. And when the day comes, and when I have the need to do specific operations to achieve specific things, it will feel in my heart like that's the right thing to do. But for now, like I said, I'm a very capable person. I usually have very practical means to get what I want, but I do have a lot of growth to do as a person internally, and devotional practice has really helped me with that.
We, of course, Anna, have some listener questions for you, which I am so excited. The patrons always ask the best questions. And the first one for you is from Glitch Bottle patron Ricardo Reyes. And Ricardo is saying and asking, Dear Alex, greetings from Germany to you and Anna. Sending a high salute with queso pa. And Anna, thank you for the pronunciation tip there. As a Panamanian living outside of Panama, Ricardo says, and working in the creative industry, it's always a source of pride to see people working hard for their dreams away from home. So Ricardo says, my question for Anna, how much creative freedom does a horror makeup artist have in the character development process? Does everything follow the guidelines set by the art director and director? Or, Ricardo is asking, is there room to develop a more distinct design?
Okay, first of all, it made me so happy to hear that there's a listener question from a Panamanian. There's not a lot of us out there in the world, and there's not a lot of us that have immigrated. So that I was very happy to hear that. So anyway, that's a really good question, and I would love to answer it. So usually, in this day and age, because it was very different back in the 80s. In the 80s, the artists had a lot more agency. But today, because productions have become so big and there is so much bureaucracy behind every little decision, the bigger and the more high budget a production is, usually the less agency the artist has. You get told what to do a lot more. So, of course, it is really nice to have your name attached to something that's really popular and really big. However, it has been in smaller indie films that I have had the agency that has allowed me not only to push myself artistically, because I have to figure out a lot more things by myself without the help of other people, but also those smaller productions have allowed me to have a more one-on-one conversation with the director where I can use everything I have to help bring his artistic vision into reality. And I enjoy that process so much. I have absolutely nothing against very small indie films because there are magical spaces where magic really happens. And I'm going to give you an example without getting into too much detail because this movie hasn't come out yet. But last year, I was working in a very small indie film that was beautifully filmed. It was filmed in film, like in actual old school film. We shot the film in a cornfield for like an entire month with no access to like civilization. And the character that I was asked to design was almost this like avenging angel entity that came from the moon. And he was like this Green Reaper looking character. And the way that the director presented him to me, I was very flattered that he gave me a lot of decision over the look of this character. It was really interesting to be asked to develop something that had an esoteric nature. Because like I said, I read a lot and I investigate a lot. And I was having these conversations with the director about, like Enochian magic and the description of biblically accurate angels and what aspects of that uncanny and eerie and terrifying, but also beautiful presence we wanted to channel into the aspect of this creature. And he was just like, because sometimes you think of effects artists as like tattooed bros who are just like, yeah, man, let's make some monsters. And here I am, this like nerd, just talking his ear off about biblically accurate angels and just them not having like human aspects the higher up they get in hierarchy and how powerful we decided this being was going to be. And just, I am having the best time of my life. And so is he. And then when I was on set filming the actual scene where this character was playing in person in the like climax of the movie where like the big thing happens, I remember being in that cornfield at 3 a.m, freezing my ass off in the middle of Ohio, just seeing the character backlit by the moon, like the reflective surface that he did for him, his scythe in his hand, just like impaling the bad guy. And just, I was sobbing because I made him this, like I brought something from the spirit world into this project. And that can only happen sometimes in smaller productions.
Did it feel like there was a summoning aspect? Was it a creative aspect? Was it, here's my creation? I mean, what was going through your mind like that?
There is a thing about creatures specifically, which is why I love working with creatures. There are moments, they're like glimmer moments where like the actor really becomes them, and just the setting, the lighting, the mood, just being in the set, watching the scene happen. I know we like to call it fiction because we are creating something that's meant to be fictional, but I feel like sometimes it becomes real. And that is a feeling that you can only experience where you're in the room where it happens. And it's my favorite thing in the world. It's the thing that makes me fight to remain in this field and to remain in this profession at all costs, no matter the crazy directions that the world takes. Even through the pandemic, I had to endure that. And, the strikes, everything that has weakened Hollywood, I still push through because it's in moments like that where you really feel those blurred lines between the fiction that you created and almost like the supernatural quality of it.
To your very point, we have another listener question for you from Ricardo Reyes. And Ricardo's saying, what has been, Ana, your most challenging experience aside from working with such renowned artists like Demi Moore? Amazing transformation, by the way. Best regards and my best wishes to both of you. Well, thank you, Ricardo. And Ana, tell us about your most challenging experience, or maybe for listeners also who might not be too familiar with what happened with Demi Moore. Please feel free to share.
This is a good moment to ask that because the movie just came out. For the movie, The Substance, which just came out and a lot of people have seen it, I was part of the very, very first phase of that movie, which was basically molding, live casting the bodies of Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley. to send those molds and those scans to France so that the makeup effects team in Europe could take on the rest of the project from there. But that meant being for a full day in the same room with Demi, taking a mold of her body. And I was the only woman in the team. And I was there because they needed a woman in the team. And it was just like a great honor to have so much responsibility. She was a lovely, amazing person to work with. I wouldn't call that necessarily challenging because she made it so easy for us. Sadly, my team didn't get credited on the movie, which happens a lot because sometimes when you only participate in the very early phases, sometimes depending on the size of the production, they like credit people that had like more involvement down the line. I'm not butthurt about it. I usually don't make a big deal about those things. Like, I know I worked with her and I'll die with that memory. But that wasn't particularly challenging. She was amazing and she made our life so easy just by being so graceful all the time. But I would say that something that has been very challenging for me, and it's not any drama or anything super like horrible, challenging, that's the word I'm thinking of, is in the past 2 years of my career, I have worked with an artist called Adrian Morat, and he won the Academy Award last year for Best Makeup 2023 for doing the makeup for the movie The Whale, where he turned Brendan Fraser into the character of Charlie. I work with him a lot, and the reason why it's challenging is because he is the most talented artist that I have met in my career. And because he is so talented, his bar is really high. So it's happened to me multiple times throughout my career that I get better because I push myself really hard, but not because other people are criticizing my work necessarily. Aiden will criticize my work and he will demand things to be better, and I highly appreciate that. But at the same time, I know that I can't be slacking. I can't be goofing around. I really need to bring my A game when I work with him because he is as good as it gets. And I'm very honored to have had those opportunities to work with him because I've been able to push myself to the limit. And he's very kind too. So it's always been in a really respectful way. But that is really what a challenge means to me, is when you're working with someone so talented that you don't want to like do mediocre work.
Your expertise, you have one foot, as I see it, in this, the Hollywood world, the world of creation, professional creation, makeup, special effects, prosthetics, casting, bodies. On the other side, you have the esoteric world. And I think this goes to something that's on a lot of people's minds who are listeners, which is, what the heck does Hollywood get right and wrong about magic? And to that, we have a listener question for you from Douglas, the wonderful Douglas Batchelor of What Magic Is This? Douglas is an excellent human and just a great guy. And Douglas is asking and saying, does Anna think that movies will ever get representations of magic and magical practitioners even half right? Or is it just too much of a trope to have bumbling witches and satanic sorcerers? So any thoughts on that, Anna?
First of all, I just want to say, just like Aiden, just like you, it is so cool to be friends with Doug. And just, I have always been such a fan of you guys. And just going from being a fan to being friends has been a really amazing experience. And I'm so fortunate to be a part of this community. So I was very happy to hear that, there was a question from Doug. So to answer that question accurately, I need to make a small note of what is currently happening in the film industry, both the facts and then my own speculations. So the film industry, which has majorly relied on huge budgets and umbrellas of big production houses, it has been tanking in the past few years. It's very sad. Incidents such as the writer's strike and the SAG-AFTRA strike have left the majority of blockbuster business model weakened and cowardly relying on a play-safe formula of remakes and sequels. And we all know it because it's all we are getting, lately. These are the facts. Now, these are my speculations. In light of the overall disappointment of audiences towards the state of the film industry and the superfluous content that they are regurgitating at us, as well as in light of the dawn of smaller format entertainment platforms such as YouTube vertical series, which I'm working a lot in that kind of project lately, and smaller streaming companies, the future seems to point towards incredible growth in one specific niche, I would say, and this is something that I believe. Targeted, highly curated content for specific audiences. I think that is where we are going, and there are a lot of things that are reaffirming that speculation of mine. So instead of mass appeal that has always been the safe old move of Hollywood's productions, content is going to start sprouting in a more diversified and refined way, due to the facility to search for things online, find and consume content that caters to specific needs of unconventional audiences. So in the wake of that curated content, I believe that people like me and my friends who are part of the film industry, who have larger aspirations besides the technical jobs that we perform, who want to take charge and tell our own stories, I can absolutely see a resurgence of cinema led by people who have a little bit more respect towards the research and the fidelity aspects of representing spiritual beliefs and esotericism. I really think that there is a big possibility for that to begin to happen. But, and I have to make a huge point about this, and this is like my own take. I think that Occult movie is an oxymoron. Because if our practice is autopsied before the masses, then they would cease to be occult. So I don't mean to sound like a gatekeeper, but I have major concerns regarding the film industry doing a step-by-step tutorial of how to successfully conduct magical operations and have that fall on the hands of ignorant people who just want to experience drive-through magic. I think that rather than gatekeeping this world, because I don't want to, I prefer to say that I wish that people took the time, care, and devotion necessary to be a responsible practitioner. And I'm not sure if I want Hollywood to autopsy like our world in such a deliberate way in which it would come across as a tutorial. So maybe even if there's a lot of misrepresentation, that has had a positive side to it, if you know what I mean. Now, and this is just like to add to Doug's question, personally, I would love to write a movie where the protagonist conducts a magical operation and they get what they want, but in a completely different turn of events that they would have never imagined. You know, like in a way where magic is like properly represented, but also it's giving the message of like, don't be an idiot, be specific. Like Dr. Stephen Skinner always says, like, you have to be specific because you're going to get what you want, but how? So I would love to see more of that, you know, in a way that's like studied and researched.
Listeners too, check the links below, because in addition to Anna's Instagram, you can also check out Anna's Substack. And I am a proud supporter of Anna on Substack. Anna writes on just a constellation of different topics. And one of the most recent posts that you wrote on, Anna, that leads directly into our next question, is specifically on Hollywood and movies and what they get wrong about esotericism and what they get right on esotericism. And in this post, I mean, you talk about everything. The Exorcist, The Craft, you know, Harry Potter, Fantasia, Cinderella. I mean, all kinds of movies and mainstream and everything. So I'll just open up the floor to you, Anna, which is, given that and given kind of mainstream, quote unquote, Hollywood and movie production and TV production with magical themes, can you share with us, what do you think Hollywood gets wrong about esotericism, and what do you think Hollywood gets right about esotericism, quote unquote?
I love that we're getting to this because I feel like this is what I'm here for. Like, this is my moment to have a voice, and I am going to use it because Hollywood has done a lot of damage to our community. I'm not going to go into all the points of the Substack article because you can just like read it at your own time, whoever's listening. But I am going to talk about what Hollywood has gotten wrong first. The most controversial and taboo topic ever first is that the film industry has this favorite punching bag, which is Satanism and anything related to the devil. So we're going to start there. I really think that the film industry has made a statement about making anything demonic its number one enemy. Obviously, because the film industry operates from the budget of corporations that follow the script of Judeo-Christian predominant Western world. So not only do they make it its number one enemy, but they grab everything magic related and they throw it randomly under the umbrella of Satanism, which in reality, all the different practices that we see butchered in Hollywood are from other currents that have nothing to do with Satanism in the majority of the cases. But I also just find it a little bit sad that after all the academic work that I have submerged myself into, and truly just replacing any pop culture propaganda with actual historical literature and the truth of where the word demon comes from culturally, and even just investigating what the satanic philosophies are actually about, which is very different from what Hollywood supposedly says that they're about. It just makes me sad as a truth seeker or an academically inclined person that the entire public perception about these philosophical and theological currents are based on things that are completely fabricated and hyperbolized just to have something to be scared of. And I'm sorry, I really just needed to start with that one because I feel like the S word is the number one enemy of Hollywood. And even the people who actually identify themselves with that community don't even have ever a seat in the table to explain themselves, And the same thing happens to everyone else in the magic community. And we know it's true. So yeah, I think that Hollywood does this amalgamation incorrectly, throws everything under the term that sounds the scariest to them, and then misrepresents the term itself. So it's been that way forever. And I do go into detail in the Substack article, but I'm very upset about that. I do think that there's one thing that Hollywood gets right. And it is that in this world, in the magical world, you have to be careful with what you do because it can have consequences in the physical world and you need to prepare for it. And I think that Hollywood has made a good point about that because in the majority of the movies that are featuring magic, it's always something along the lines of, ooh, these kids didn't know what they were doing and they grabbed a Ouija board and now their lives are going to shit because all these things are having a snowball effect in the spirit world. And I think that that is a correct message, maybe through wrong means of representation of the procedures themselves. But I think that that is a message that should always be sent in some shape or form. So Hollywood has absolutely gotten that right. Be careful with what you do. Know what you're doing. If you're stupid, you're going to get in trouble. However, I would like to reiterate that regardless of the flavor of spirituality that you pick, which I am not a discriminating person in this community at all. I love that everybody has their options. You can use its principles and its powers for good or for evil. And I think that Hollywood does know that. And I think that they have shown that to the public. There is not a single religion or spiritual current that can safeguard you from the clutches of human nature. So evil is both in the eye of the beholder and in the hand that wields the wand, and not in the magic itself. And if you look closely enough you can see this even in Hollywood. And, a very simple example is Harry Potter, where we have some people using magic in an ethical way versus tyrants that want to use magic as a means to abuse power. Then there's another comment I want to make about Hollywood getting something right. This is a pretty funny one, and a lot of people might not be acquainted with it. But in this year, 2024, there was a cartoon for adults that came out called Has Been Hotel, and it has a sister show called Hell of a Boss. So those shows are about demons in hell. And I believe that the creator of those shows has done a lot more research than we usually see in Hollywood. And even if she has taken the artistic license to make a lot of things like different or not 100% accurate, there is one scene from one episode of Hell of a Boss that completely, it was so funny and it was so brilliant. And I don't know if she meant it this way. But basically, one of the main characters of that show is Stolas. We know Stolas from the Grimoires. And Stolas is talking about how he spent his last Halloween. And he's reluctantly standing in this circle of cultists that summon him. And you see his sigil. Oh, it is his sigil, exactly as it is, as we know it. And he's just standing there in the circle of cultists that are sacrificing some man. And Stolas is just standing there very reluctantly, looking very sad and not wanting to be there. And then this blood gets splashed on his face. And I think that what's funny about that is that it's like she knows that Stolas is of astronomy and plants, not of human sacrifices and blood. So he's not happy to be there. He's not having the best time of his life. And I think that is a little tongue-in-cheek statement about Goetia demons being misrepresented.
Would it be fair to say that perhaps in this more focused niche world, you'll see more pieces like that, where it's very niche, it's very focused on a specific spirit, it's very wink and nod? Would that be potentially some of the things that we could see?
Absolutely. I think so, because also, and we're all aware, there's been this resurgence of magic and the studying of Western occultism and esotericism. And, we are connecting to each other through Discord, through podcasts, through Patreons. We are finding each other, and we're encouraging each other to go back to the books, to go back to the traditions, to go back to the literature. And I think it is a very beautiful thing that people are finding their own spiritual paths that resonate with them, as long as they don't use it for selfish means, or which is always obvious with everything in this world. I think it's a really beautiful thing. And I think that in the wake of that, we're going to have a lot of people in the creative field that are going to be knowledgeable about these things, compared to generations that were completely shied away from these things because of the satanic panic and all those things that came before us.
I absolutely love that. And again, I know myself, and I try not to speak for the listeners, Anna, but I will in this case, are so appreciative of your exact voice and experience, because you have the esoteric practice and direct experience ever since you were a young child, but also you have your professional experience, which I'm so thankful for. And to that point, Anna, we have a question. Speaking of Aiden Walker, that guy who is amazing and an esoteric legend in and of himself, Aiden Walker has a question for you, asking and saying, so this is pretty far out of Hollywood in a mainstream way, and it's quite a low-budget film, but, Aiden says, I would love Anna's thoughts on magic as portrayed in Outcast in 2010 by Cole McCarthy. So what can you tell us about Outcast, Anna?
So, Aiden, I had to look up the movie and watch it just to be able to answer your question, because sometimes, I haven't seen every single movie out there. But to my surprise, there was a very interesting representation of magic in this film, because I feel like instead of relying on a blanket umbrella cliche, the creators of this movie try to portray magic in the form of the very personal, folk magic of the regular normal people that are not like super figures of power or ceremonial magicians. I am not an expert in any shape or form in Celtic traditions. So I would not be able to tell you if the way that they represented magic in this movie is completely accurate or not. However, I will say it is very intricate and it is very interesting because a lot of the things that I see are things that we do, like the creation of sigils and runes and just like the rituals themselves, all the little details of like the moments where they're performing rituals and working with the elements. And it's very like dirt sorcery, like it's very folk like. And I don't see that a lot in Hollywood. So thank you, Aiden, for recommending that film because that was very interesting. When those movies like that represent magic this way, I don't like the magic to be over-explained. I like the audience to be confused and being like, dude, I don't know what they're doing there, but they know what they're doing and it's very unfamiliar to me and I'm scared.
Now I'm going to have to see this. So this is great.
It's good. I'm going to say it's good. It's good. It's very eerie. I like when a movie has the ability to build ambience and tension and just like not rush into the scary stuff, but build like that environment desolate. Like I love that.
Well, thank you, Anna. And thank you, Aiden. That's a lovely question, as usual. Anna, the next listener question for you is from William McCall. And William McCall is asking, Anna, when 3D movies were big, did it affect the way that you worked in movies, unquote? So anything about 3D movies that you can share?
Yes. So I do have to say that I was not in the film industry back then, but my colleagues do say that it made a lot of the practical work go away. And now people are having the same fear with AI, which is another entire can of worms or rabbit hole, if you want to call it that way. I am not super, super scared. I think that there is like a renaissance of directors that have a soft spot for practical effects. And I am seeing a lot of people wanting to see that, not only because of the way that it looks on screen, but also there is something magical about having the creature or the monster or the makeup right there in front of you. Sometimes it's a little sad when an actor has to react to 3 dots in someone's face instead of like seeing like the scary thing in front of them. So I do think that there are people that have that appreciation for how immersive it is to have practical things physically in the movie set in front of you.
Some listeners, Anna, might think in their heads, oh, everyone in Hollywood is an esotericist or has a spiritual practice. Or some people might say, no, that's all special effects and it's all just, everyone's really an agnostic atheist. Or maybe the truth is somewhere in between. So can you just tell us, based on your experience with your colleagues, projects, people you've worked with, do most people have some kind of engagement in the esoteric, or is it kind of a mix? What do you think?
It is a very interesting social analysis to see what kind of people just make up a film crew. Because I feel like in the film industry, there's a lot of people that are very alternative with their lifestyles. And that obviously means, yes, there are a lot of esotericists and occultists. Maybe they don't wear that as a flag. Maybe they don't wear it on their sleeve. But when you get to know them, sometimes you start learning this about them. I think it's because film people, we are very unconventional. A lot of us are like underdogs of society that belong to some kind of minority. And usually the not fitting in and, that inclination to finding your own path often leads you in interesting directions, like, into magic. But specifically in LA, I do want to say that there is this one magic shop, and it's also, for me, it's kind of like a community center because it's where, for example, where they brought Dr. Alexander Cummins to give lectures, and I've been able to attend all these events and these classes and just get access to really great books. It's called The Crooked Path. And in that store, I have met a lot of people because I just go in there to talk to people, to be honest. Like sometimes I'll buy things, but I just really like talking to the people. They're so interesting. And there's a lot of people there that work in the film industry. And I meet them first and foremost as somebody who's interested in magic, because if we're there for a reason. And then I come to learn that they also work in the film industry. So, you know, I don't like to talk about my personal life or my spiritual practice in a work environment. I am like a consummate professional. When I'm on set, I'm unrecognizable. I'm in my zone, doing my thing, being the actor's number one service person, just being like, do you need anything? Like, I'm very like completely committed to work when I'm at work, and I don't like warm up to people that easily. But through, you know, the spaces in LA where you see people of this community, then I have found that a lot of them are also in film.
Are there any other misconceptions that people might have about the esoteric and the occult in Hollywood? Or is there anything else that you'd like to leave listeners with? Just, you know, big picture, small picture, anything about all these different factors with movies and magic and everything in between?
Absolutely. So I do have a list of things that are like my conclusions about Hollywood. But first, I want to say that Hollywood, the word Hollywood, which is what I work in, is a metonym to basically mean the film industry based in the United States that is mostly coming from LA. I believe that there might be really good European movies that get the occult more correctly or better represented. And I'm really excited about finding out about those. Unfortunately, they're not that easy to come across for us in this part of the world. Hollywood, however, very American-based. It just really has these patterns. And number one, throwing everything under the satanic umbrella. Number two, assuming that everyone that works in the left-hand path is bad or doing evil, and that is not true. I know a lot of people that work in the left-hand path. They're amazing people. They are very humanitarian. The left-hand path in general is very misunderstood, very misrepresented. You know, it's like this whole assuming that people who do yoga meditations are good, but the people that work with Hecate are assholes. And that is simply not true. It is not true. Just like, honestly, go out there and talk to people, see what kind of people they are. Just don't listen to everything you see in the movies. Assuming that most people that use magic do it to hex or to hurt, when in reality, the majority of people just use magic as a means of spirituality to find meaning in their lives and have a beautiful connection with the divine, and also to influence some little things in their lives here and there. And not everything is about hexing or hurting. And it would never cross my mind to hex someone, you know? Just that, like, it would never cross my mind to, like, want to kill someone. Like, it's insane to me to think that people see us that way. And then last but not least, they always assume that magic practitioners always have this world domination agenda. I don't know, Alexander, but like, do you want to dominate the world? Because that sounds like a lot of work to me. And I really just like reading my little books and going on little hikes. I don't have time for that. And I don't think any of us does. Am I right?
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I want to dominate is dominating making my bed in the morning so I can get my cup of coffee when I wake up. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the truth. Magicians exposed you guys. This is the truth about us.
What other projects are you working on? What other projects are you thinking about? What are some of the things that are, you know, captivating your day-to-day?
So first, I'm going to talk about something that's not film related. I really debated in my mind whether I wanted to mention this or not, but I will, just for the reason that people might be able to help me. So I have a very intimidating esoteric project of an academic nature that I have to undertake. Unfortunately, I can't go into detail about it yet, but I just want to say that I really, really wish that I could stop time and go get a degree in philosophy. Oh my God, how helpful would it be right now? But also, if there are any experts on Hellenic polytheism listening to this, and you don't mind having a little chat with me on the side, this is my SOS smoke signal. Please reach out. I don't like bugging people, but there's a thing that I want to do, and it's a little heavy. And when the time comes, I'll talk about it. But yes, then getting into art. I am also currently working on a personal undertaking with 2 business partners. I cannot talk about the details of that. Just it's something we're trying to pitch. And if it gets picked up, that is going to be amazing. But for now, NDA. There is a painting series that I want to start pretty soon, and it has an esoteric meaning behind it. So that's going to be fun when, I can have more time to myself. Well, there's my Substack. I am always publishing, writing work pretty consistently. Not all of it is going to be esoterically inclined. A lot of it is very philosophical in nature, or just like me getting really deep into thought about things. The last post I made is about the political situation in the US, and that's all I'm going to say for now. I want to write a fantasy book at some point, and I'm starting to think about, the plot and the characters and everything, because I really have a very specific story that I want to tell. So yeah, maybe I'm going to have a fantasy writer arc at some point in my life. I don't know. And, since you're asking if anyone in the esoteric community wants to collaborate on anything cool, please reach out. I'm always open to collaborate with people. I'm also always happy to fabricate things for people. Recently, I had a friend who had a ritual where he had to create a replica of a human skull to use that replica for mold making purposes. And he had very short time for that. So I 3D scanned it with my phone and 3D printed it with a friend's 3D printer. And I gave it to him in like 3 days. And it was exactly the same. So that was crazy. And I'm happy that I could help someone with their magic operation in that sense. Ways to support or contact. I have my normal art Instagram account. It's mostly makeup stuff. It's Ave Monsters. So that is AVE Monsters. Then there's my more personal Instagram account. It's Ave Magic. So, there's those 2. I have the Substack, which is Ave Words. So everything's Ave. Ave, by the way, people think that Ave is like, that my name is Ava. And some people mistakenly call me, no, it's my initials. It's Ana Victoria Esquivel. So that's where the Ave comes from. I have an Etsy store too. I have not put anything new in there lately, but maybe I will at some point. And then there's my website, avemonsters.com.
Anything else about Hollywood, about magic, about art?
Alexander, if there's one thing that I want to say, just because of the week where we're recording this podcast, without getting too specific, I'm just going to say, I know that a lot of us in the esoteric community are very unsettled right now because of the state of the US. Many of the listeners might not live here, but a lot of them do. And, there are concerns regarding, are we going to undergo a witch hunt? Are people coming for us? Like, what's going to change in the next few years? And as a person who came just, with the intention of finding her community, as a person who became friends with Alexander with the intention of building community, I'm just going to say, you're not alone. We have each other. There's a lot of us that are alone and floating, and we're finding bigger groups of us every day more and more. And within these communities, I have really found a lot of solace and support during these difficult times. So reach out to people, go onto the Discord groups, join the group chats. Just don't be alone. We're all in this together. And if they couldn't get rid of us during the Inquisition, they're not going to get rid of us now. I send everybody a really big hug, and we got this. That's all I want to say.
Incredibly inspiring words from someone who has an incredibly inspiring story. And thank you for sharing those gems of courage and inspiration. It is a true honor to be a part of your community, Anna. And as you say, I certainly encourage and echo that to support one another in times good and bad. Hollywood makeup artist, writer, painter, esotericist, Ana Victoria Esquivel. Thank you so much, Ana, for taking the time and sharing about your wonderful practice and your professional experience in Hollywood today. Really appreciate it.
The honor is mine. Thank you so much, Alexander. I am very grateful. Thank you.
Listeners and Glitch Bottle patrons, I hope you enjoyed that podcast with Anna as much as I did. It is so refreshing to get a little peek behind the curtain of Hollywood and the media, and just how these very complex topics of esotericism, ritual, demons, spirits, how these things are treated, and also hearing Anna's direct experience, not only working with actors, but what actually goes on behind the scenes, all the work that's involved, the special effects, the design, and how her practice informs that every single day. So definitely make sure to check out the links below to support Anna. Check out Anna's Instagram, support Anna's Substack. I know I do. And again, a huge thanks to each and every Glitch Bottle patron on patreon.com/glitchbottle. You are the best. And if you'd like to become a patron as well, check out the links below. As always, this is Alexander Eth reminding you to invoke often, uncork the uncommon, and keep the light.